Morning, everybody, and welcome to our EY webinar for Nordic consumer industry. Happy to have you here again. And today we have two of our strong consumer experts from our Norwegian practice, Dag and Anders, who will present a little on consumer behavior. And first of all, remind everybody to please be on mute. I think we all are getting used to this in these times. And then if you like what you see and would like to see more, we have our code here so you can scan it in and get access to the webcast. And also in the end of the presentation, you will see a link where you can subscribe to our consumer newsletters and receive our insight and our point of views on the consumer industry. But let me hand over to Dag and Anders, who will take you through the next 30 minutes.
In the chat of this meeting, you'll find the recordings from the last 3 sessions we've been running, as well as a PDF describing 5 distinct consumer behaviors caused by the pandemic. We are combining qualitative and quantitative research. We are getting close to 100 interviews with people covering all ages and different life situations. We have also conducted a survey with close to 5,000 participants to look at people's spending patterns right now, but also in the future. Our focus is on the Nordic countries, but we scan and gather information from all over the globe. We are looking at consumers in general, but we also find a lot of specific insights that are more relevant to some sectors and companies than others. Since last week, we've been talking to several of you one-on-one about more specific insights and how these can concretely help out for your company. So if you also want to have a more detailed discussion about the insights we are gathering, please contact us. We are seeing some very interesting data popping up now. 20% have more or less stopped leaving their homes, at least to go out shopping. And that is truly exceptional. But what I think is even more concerning is that only a month ago, a little as 25% thought that the COVID situation would last 9 months or longer. That number has grown to 60%. So people are starting to see that this will not end anytime soon. And the question then, of course, is how will that affect their behavior? You have gotten to know our 5 personas. They describe 5 distinct consumer behaviors, 5 distinct needs, and 5 future spending patterns. What we see clearly now is that they all have one thing in common as well, and that is that they are all getting tired of the whole thing. However, they don't deal with getting tired of the pandemic in the same way. Some pragmatics are already going back to more physical shopping. Within this group, a lot of consumers, more senior consumers, had turned to digital shopping for the very first time, but are now happy to return to their physical shopping, rediscovering the human contact that they had been missing. We also spoke to one younger person in his early 40s that now actually go to do his groceries as often as possible to remedy his boredom. So it seems like the craving for experiences is growing. And remember, what we called experiences before the COVID pandemic is not at all the same as what can be qualified as experiences now. You can get away with a lot less costly designs these days to create retail experiences simply because people's everyday life has gotten a lot more monotone. So turn this boredom into your advantage. We've spoken to several people that are now happy to participate in consumer research, for instance, for all kinds of brands. Voting on what chocolate flavor they prefer has never been as appealing as it is right now. People have time, they are bored, and they are willing to engage. So how can that inspire what you propose? people are still telling us about the importance of brands and retailers controlling the situation as well as they can. One guy told us how strange it was being back to his clothing store without them having a plexiglass in front of their counter. But it seems like most people are more concerned about what they actually see you do than to hear about you talking about it. So this might be the right time, at least in the Nordic countries, to tune down the whole COVID communication a little bit more towards the background. As a business, you want to show responsibility, of course, but you don't want to hold people's hope of the pandemic getting more into control either, to hold it down. So look carefully into how you balance this. One very concrete feedback from people, though, if you have a physical store, take care of all those stickers you've glued to the floor about keeping distance. Worn down stickers on a messy floor is the last thing you want right now. In consumers' minds, this communicates that it's not anymore really a pressing issue and that you don't take the whole thing very seriously. So if you have a digital retail space, you have to keep that header or link giving basic information about how you deal with COVID. Not having it makes you look extremely careless, but you could maybe also tune that a little bit down. And speaking about digital, I would like to remind you of these very relevant figures that we also spoke about last time. 40% say they now shop more online. 1/3 have bought something digitally that they had recently only bought physically. And most importantly, 52% say they will keep this new shopping behavior. If that turns out to be true, retail and shopping will never be the same again. We've been talking a lot about these curves, about these scenarios, and they are extremely important. They show the different scenarios for how the pandemic will play out. Will we control the pandemic and then have a quick recovery? That's the top curve. Or maybe a slow recovery. That's the second one. Or will there be a second wave or even multiple waves resulting in new lockdowns or other more dramatic measures affecting how we live our lives and of course then also the economic downturn? Nobody knows. We're still in the very beginning of this outbreak and we have to innovate for this extremely uncertain situation somewhere down along this line. If we map our personas on these scenarios, we see that the hedonists lean toward a belief in rather quick recovery. The pragmatics believe the recovery will be slower, while the cynics wait for the second wave, and the annoyed and the neurotic worry about a volatile pandemic resulting in multiple downturns. This affects how they behave today, and this will affect how they will behave when we see which of these scenarios that will play out. Speaking about scenarios, I think we all need to be very creative about what kind of scenarios we are planning for when preparing for what to come. The World Health Organization still haven't concluded on whether or not we actually get immune, and in that case, for how long. Nevertheless, Matt Hancock, the Minister of Health in the UK, is already talking about giving bracelets to those who are immune. That is taken directly from the Steven Soderbergh movie Contagion from 2011. Well, if it turns out that immunity is real and long-lasting, how will that affect your customer and even your employees? Will that be something people put in their resume when applying for a job? And what freedom will the immune get that others don't? And what responsibilities will they have? And I cannot even believe that I'm talking about this, but you should probably plan for these kind of scenarios as well. So we have been talking about consumer insights since the pandemic really started in the Nordics. But when you start asking yourself questions like how to deal with immunity, we are no longer only talking about consumer insights. We are talking about how we all must be able to dramatically transform our businesses. And with transformation, I don't mean how you can transform to be ready for whatever is down the line. I'm talking about the capacity to transform all the time, depending on what is happening around us right now. I don't know if you have seen the pizza restaurant, that now make face shields using their pizza ovens to melt plastic. That is radical transformation. Only thing is that the pizza guy, he just had to get the idea, test it, and then start. Things are unfortunately way more complicated when you are a huge organization. So this is what we are focusing on. How do we move from consumer insights to use those insights as a way to transform our companies? We are starting out today by taking a closer look at how to succeed with insights-led innovation. And we've been giving you consumer insights as the pandemic evolves, but we haven't really stopped to talk about what insights actually are. And insights, of course, can come from anywhere. It can be data, qualitative research, technology, market dynamics, and so much more. But what I think a lot of people forget is that insights are not what we see or hear. It is what is hidden behind what we observe. Someone saying something like this very famous example from Henry Ford, talking about asking people what they want, and then they would probably just ask for a faster horse. That isn't insight, that's just feedback. Insights are understanding what is truly important to this 1902 focus group participant. Stuff that he probably hasn't yet understood himself. This is a generic innovation process. It will look different from sector to sector and company to company, but basically something ignites an initiative that in the end is introduced to a market. Then you optimize, change, and scale according to how it plays in that market. If you're among the better ones at innovation, this isn't a linear process, but a circular one, repeating itself in a closed loop. And no matter what your innovation process looks like, the question is, where do you fuel it with insights, and how do you use those insights to increase speed and success rates? Insights are different through these steps, but we firmly believe insights should be the driver through any of these phases. So we will break it down now and have a look at some examples for each phase. A young woman we talked to was out jogging the other day and actually got yelled at. Can you believe that? I mean, an older woman yelled at her because she thought she hadn't kept the appropriate distance. The image of joggers is really changing from being a sign of healthy living. Certain now look at them as sweaty, fast-moving, out of control contaminators. And several have told us that they feel a little bit ashamed of going out for a run. So this picture is taken from a New York Times article where experts debate the risk of contamination from jogging, as well as how uncomfortable it is to run with your mouth covered. These are insights on new needs we didn't have only some weeks ago. The best innovation comes from the best identification of new behavior and new needs. So Nike has pivoted to create this face shield for health workers, but we also found this concept. And this was originally proposed as an air filtering mask for doing sports in polluted areas. Well, if I was Nike, I would start digging into this really fast. Maybe even their face shield for health workers can be targeted to people doing sports like running outdoors. You all know this guy, of course, and it is extremely worn out to mention him when talking about innovation. Apple act on insights as well, but Jobs didn't really rely heavily on customer insights. He just really understood what drives people instead of asking them about it. And innovation can, of course, be done by that really clever entrepreneur kind of guy like Jobs, but that just isn't the setup for most large corporations. There are politics, different perspectives, and collective uncertainty. Well, there's a guy called Franco Mascara. Great name. And he's not as known as Jobs, and he didn't change the world that much, but he's an interesting example of an important lesson anyway. Actually, Franco is so little known that we didn't even find a picture of him, but he is a blue-collar employee working at Elisha, an Italian company innovating these kind of products for your kitchen. And Franco came up with the solution to one of their patented products. And every time you catch yourself doing innovation in the boardroom or the innovation team only, then think of Franco Mascara and all the value he made for his employer. I think this is especially important during the phase of creation and realization, and it is extremely important right now in the crisis we are in. You need management focus on innovation. You need your specialists in innovation. And Doug will soon talk about that, but you also need to involve your whole company. This is one of those examples that make me extremely impressed and profoundly happy. Michelin, most known for their tires and secondly for their restaurant guides, are developing a reusable mask. It has a hard plastic chassis with the washable filter that you can change. The filter can be used roughly 20 times before you need to replace it and is extremely easy to produce. They already have the plastic molding tool going. Normally that would take at least 6 months, and they did it in 3 weeks. That seriously gives me goosebumps, and what I think is even better, because you could think that since they are moving that fast, they would just rush through it, but they actually do prototypes for each modification, and they drive them to the nearby hospitals to test them with real users. There's a strong innovation moral there. You are never in too much of a hurry to test what you are doing. Testing might have to be a little bit less rigid, but you will always get important insights and better results from testing. When you finally introduce your product to the market, that's when insights really get crucial. Ironically, this is also where a lot of companies start failing on it. Insights should be easy at this stage. You're getting real data about purchases, and you have something real and tangible you can show people and talk to them about. But this is also the phase where there is usually some kind of a handover to a different rig in large companies. The companies that are the very best at insights-led innovation and transformation are able to link all of the insights from the market to their innovators. This is essential and doesn't need to be that hard, but over and over again we see this dialogue breaking down because of company silos and a lack of filtering what is important to whom and what isn't. And Neuro is a relevant example. They are getting a lot of attention now thanks to their self-driving delivery robot enabling delivery from local shops in their surroundings. It's yet a quite small company, but has been founded by, among others, the former chief engineer of Google Autonomous Driving Program. And maybe this is something we'll see in Nordic streets as well faster than we had thought a month back. But the point about showing it, however, is that autonomous cars are gathering data and improving themselves at a rapid rate when having been introduced to the market. They are learning in the streets. So how can you design insights and feedback to be an integrated part of your products and services, even if you're not doing self-driving delivery robots? Because if you're not clever with your insights after having introduced your innovation, you will never be able to do the most important thing of all, and that is to optimize, change, and scale, aka transform. And Cleanse EX is a maker of antibacterial disinfection and has, of course, lately had an insane demand for their product. However, they had problems distributing it and called the manufacturer of those small fish-shaped soya sauce containers you get with your sushi. Well, that's a really simple but clever move right now. Both companies changed their products. One had the ingredients everyone wants right now, and the other company had the distribution and packaging perfectly adapted to it. That's system thinking and insights-led innovation in beautiful harmony. It always looks easy when others do innovation using insights in a clever way, but it's always seems a lot harder when you have to do it yourself. So, Dag, could you please share with us your view on what that special insights-led innovation sauce is?
Absolutely, Anders. Thank you for a great introduction. And I think that if we move on to the next slide, I have a few points that really states what companies are doing in terms of systematically treating insights and innovation. And especially when it comes to the first point, innovation should be treated as a competence, and people should be selected for their roles. And I think that that's one of the key things that that successful companies do. They really treat innovation equally as important as any other role or profession in the company. Moreover, innovation is, of course, treated as something that is in the core of the business and not something that is put on the side and not a sideshow. And I think the meaning of that is really that there may be different models of incubators and innovation hubs, but at the core means focus, and it can't just be something that you do every now and then. It needs to be put into system. And then you need to have a robust strategy behind this, how innovation is systematically is going to be put into place, a clear plan for the purpose, the mission for the innovation process, and what human and technological capabilities that really are needed, both from an innovation perspective, but also from an insight perspective. And then innovation, of course, needs to be put into practice. So I think that you showed the one slide where you had the process along the x-axis, Anders, and the process seems quite simple and logic. But I think the essence here, what companies that really excel at this do great, is they nourish this process and they do repeat it. And of course, repetition, like anything else, will eventually reach to not necessarily perfection, but you will get a lot better at doing it. And then the innovation part, as you said, or the insight part, excuse me, and that is systematically brought into the innovation process at given stages. And I think that just recognizing that there are different types of insights that are used during the identification stage, the validation phase, and the test phase, and through the scaling phase, and that needs to be put into a system as part of the innovation process. Then, as you touched upon, Anders, there are of course different categories of insights that will give different answer to different questions during this process, and I think that most companies do recognize that, but there is a huge difference in types of insights, especially when we're talking about transactional data that we're looking on, especially now in this in the time we're in now. That will give the answer to what and how much is consumed, while the more experienced and in-depth qualitative-based research will give you even more important answer as to why it is actually consumed. So these insights are equally important, but I think in this period you need to stay really, really close to your clients. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll briefly touch upon the part where we're looking at what kind of leadership attitude and management attitude towards insight-led innovation in the companies that excel is really the secret sauce. And I think that being able to balance the fine balance then of ignoring or acting upon persuasive data and insight is something that often is very human-centric, and companies that we look at are often more willing to watch declining and negative profits from existing business models than risk losing money on actually trying out something new. And I think that the companies who are succeeding with this is a little more leaning towards the trying out new stuff. Moreover, understanding that that there is a part of the process is learning through failures, and I think that the companies that do this really well recognizes that it's about managing the cost of change. That means failing early and often rather than late in the process, and also embracing change in consumer behavior and new technologies. That's really important. So seeing these changes and being able to mobilize when the timing is right, that is something that is really important, and that's something that we've seen the last several weeks. But we can really ask ourselves also, who's the real innovator in these times we're in, the ones that are creating a demand for something that is not there. That is what we call disruptive innovation, right? And I think that most of the examples that we've seen so far is more to the adjacent innovation and adjusting things that do really already exist, or even sustaining innovation, which is evolution of existing services, right? So there are different types of innovation. And I think that one thing, some of the companies that really succeed, they have understood that changes do happen gradually, and then they do happen suddenly. And it's been a hard learning for many of the companies the last several weeks, especially on this. So this is about planning for volatility and change, and of course being ready to scale when the timing is right. And the companies that do this well, they do have a relentless focus on the things that is driving the delta in the market, looking at the early trend and indicators of change, and being able to tap into new revenue streams and demands as that changes over time. And ultimately, of course, this is the most important aspect of this is the timing. There are many examples of things that has been introduced early when the technology was ready, but the consumer wasn't, and vice versa. But I think that the key essence here is that you need to be ready when the changes do happen, and then you need to be able to scale. And I think that some of the points that we put through here on the last two slides are, if you focus on those, it will make you able to actually do some of these things. So thank you very much for joining us in this meeting, and as Henrik and Anna said, please join us on the 7th of May, and we'll talk about economic scenarios, impact on consumer products and retail. So thank you very much for today, and stay safe.
Thank you, Anders and Dag. Highly appreciated.